Story 1. The Tunnel Beneath ASHCROFT Academy. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up, I was the kind of person who always looked for a logical explanation before jumping to supernatural conclusions. Every creaking floorboard was just old with settling. Every shadow in the corner of my room was nothing more than a trick of the light. Haunted houses, cursed objects, and ghost stories were entertaining, but I never imagined I'd become the main character in one. That changed during my senior year at ASHCROFT Academy. The school sat alone on top of a heavily wooded hill nearly 30 miles from the nearest town. Built during World War II, the property had originally served as a military rehabilitation hospital before being converted into a private boarding school decades later. Most students knew the official history. Almost nobody knew the rest. The older maintenance workers refused to enter the basement after dark. They never explained why. Whenever someone asked, they'd simply say, "Some places should stay closed." Naturally, that only made us more curious. My name is Daniel, and my three closest friends were Ethan, Mason, and Tyler. Ethan never took anything seriously. Mason loved anything mysterious and spent hours reading about abandoned buildings and unsolved disappearances. Tyler carried his video camera everywhere, convinced he'd eventually record something that would go viral online. As for me, I was only there because I wanted to prove every ghost story on campus was complete nonsense. That confidence disappeared one rainy Thursday night. At exactly 2:13 a.m., I woke to a metallic bang beneath my bed. It wasn't loud enough to wake the entire dorm, but it was sharp enough to pull me out of a deep sleep. I checked my phone. 2:13. I waited. Nothing. After a few minutes, I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. Then it came again. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 Not on my door. Not on the wall. Directly beneath my bed. The sound was so clear that I instinctively lifted my feet off the mattress. I stared into the darkness beneath me. Nothing. The next morning I mentioned it over breakfast. Before I could finish, Mason interrupted. "You heard it too?" My stomach tightened. "You've heard it before?" He nodded. "For almost a week." Ethan laughed. "You two are freaking yourselves out. Old buildings make noises." Tyler didn't say anything. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed us a video he'd recorded the previous night. It was grainy and poorly lit, but the audio was unmistakable. 3 knocks. Exactly like the ones I'd heard. Then the camera picked up something else. A whisper, barely audible. Tyler turned the volume all the way up. We listened again. Down here, the 4 of us looked at each other in silence. Nobody laughed anymore. That afternoon, Mason convinced us to visit the school archives hidden behind the library. Most of the documents were ordinary. Yearbooks, renovation permits, old photographs, but tucked inside a dusty filing cabinet was a faded blueprint dated 1944. It showed something none of us expected: an entire underground level. Service tunnels stretched beneath every dormitory, classroom, and chapel. One corridor led to a large chamber beneath the east wing. Someone had crossed that section out with thick black ink. Across the page, written in shaky handwriting, were 5 words: "Do not break the seal." There was no signature, no explanation, no official stamp, just those words. That evening we searched online for information about the hospital that once occupied the property. Most public records had been archived or deleted. But Mason found an old newspaper article mentioning a fire inside the psychiatric ward during the winter of 1947. 23 patients disappeared. Not died. Disappeared. The article ended abruptly, as though the remaining paragraphs had been cut away before being scanned. Tyler leaned back in his chair. "Tell me you guys aren't thinking what I'm thinking." Ethan grinned. "We're going underground." Saturday night arrived with heavy rain and dense fog. Just after midnight, we slipped out of our dorm carrying backpacks, flashlights, spare batteries, and Tyler's camera. The basement entrance was hidden behind the old boiler room. Finding the sealed doorway wasn't difficult. Opening it was. The steel door had been welded shut years earlier, but corrosion had weakened the hinges. After nearly 20 minutes of forcing it open with an iron pipe, the metal finally groaned loud enough to echo through the basement. A wave of freezing air rolled out from the darkness beyond. The smell hit us immediately. Rotting wood, wet concrete, rust, and something else. Something sickeningly sweet, like flowers left on a grave for too many weeks. Tyler adjusted his camera. "You guys smell that?" Nobody answered. We stepped inside. The tunnel was much larger than we'd imagined. Old electrical cables hung from the ceiling. Water dripped steadily into shallow puddles that reflected our flashlight beams. Every footstep echoed far ahead of us, farther than seemed possible. After walking for several minutes, Ethan suddenly stopped. "What is that?" Our lights landed on the wall. Someone had scratched hundreds of tally marks into the concrete. Not dozens, hundreds. Some were fresh enough that gray dust still clung to the grooves. Others looked decades old. Mason whispered. Someone was counting. Then Tyler noticed something even stranger. The tally marks didn't stop. They continued around the corner, as if whoever carved them had kept walking. We followed. The temperature dropped so quickly our breath became visible. The tunnel widened into an enormous circular room supported by thick concrete pillars. In the center stood a single wooden chair, facing the wall. Nothing else. No table. No equipment. Just the chair. Tyler slowly circled it with the camera. Why would anyone put a chair down here? Before anyone could answer, a loud knock echoed behind us. One knock, then another, then another. 3. Exactly 3. But this time, it hadn't come from beneath the floor. It had come from somewhere deeper in the darkness ahead. And something answered. A slow, raspy voice drifted through the tunnel. "You came." None of us moved. The voice spoke again, clearer this time. "I've been waiting." Tyler's camera suddenly lost focus. The screen filled with static. Then, for less than a second, it captured the silhouette of a tall figure standing behind Ethan. There was nobody there when we turned around, but something was definitely breathing. Not one of us. Something else. Very close. And it was getting closer. Story 2. The last security shift. When I accepted the overnight security job at Westbrook Mall, I thought it would be the easiest money I'd ever make. The mall had been closed for almost 5 years after a massive electrical fire destroyed most of the upper level. My only responsibilities were to patrol the building every hour, monitor the security cameras, and report any signs of trespassers. The first 3 nights were painfully boring. The building was silent except for the occasional groan of old metal expanding and contracting in the cold. By the 4th night, I had memorized every hallway, every abandoned storefront, and every emergency exit. That's when camera 27 appeared. There wasn't supposed to be a camera 27. The control room only had 26 monitors. Yet every night at exactly 3:03 a.m., a 27 screen flickered to life by itself. It showed a long corridor I had never seen before. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper instead of concrete. The lights worked, and at the far end of the hallway, a woman stood perfectly still. She always wore the same pale gray dress. Her hair covered her face. She never moved. The first time I saw her, I assumed someone had hacked into the camera system. The second time, I checked every hallway in the building. Nothing. No extra corridor. No woman. No camera 27. The mysterious monitor disappeared the moment I left the security office. I started taking photos of the screen with my phone. Every picture came out completely black. Only the timestamp remained visible. 3:03 a.m. 1 week later, I noticed something strange. The woman had moved. Not much. Maybe 3 or 4 feet closer to the camera. I convinced myself I was imagining it. Until the following night. She had moved again. Closer. Every night she advanced a little farther down the hallway. I calculated that within another week, she would reach the camera. Curiosity got the better of me. I searched through decades of maintenance records until I found an original blueprint from the mall's construction. There, hidden beneath the food court, was a section labeled simply, Service Level C. The level didn't exist anymore. Officially, the elevators no longer reached it. The stairwell entrance had been filled with concrete years ago. Why? Nobody could tell me. Late Friday night, I found an old freight elevator that still had power. The button for level C had been scratched beyond recognition, but it still worked. The elevator descended far longer than it should have. The doors opened into a hallway identical to the one on camera 27. The wallpaper, the lights, everything, except the hallway was empty. I walked forward slowly. Halfway down the corridor, I noticed dozens of old security monitors stacked against one wall. Every screen displayed the same image. Me, standing in the hallway. From behind, I spun around. Nobody. Then every monitor switched at once. The image changed. Now they showed me, still standing there. Except something was directly behind me. Tall, motionless, its face hidden by long black hair. I refused to turn around again. Instead, I ran. The elevator doors were already closing. As they slammed shut, I caught one final glimpse of the hallway. The woman had finally reached the camera. She wasn't looking at it anymore. She was looking directly at me. I quit the next morning. The mall was demolished 2 years later. Whenever I drive past the empty lot, I sometimes glance at my car's rearview mirror, just to make sure no one is standing behind me. Story 3, Cabin Number 17. My friends wanted a relaxing weekend in the mountains. I wanted reliable phone service. Unfortunately, they won. The rental property sat deep inside Black Pine National Forest, surrounded by endless trees and miles of gravel roads. There were 17 cabins in total. Only 16 appeared on the map. When we arrived, the owner handed us the keys with an awkward smile. "Whatever you do," he hesitated, "stay away from cabin 17. Naturally, we asked why. "It's unsafe." That was all he would say. Our cabin overlooked a small lake. Cabin 17 sat nearly half a mile away at the edge of the forest. Every window had been boarded shut, at least. That's what it looked like during the day. The first night, I woke around 1:40 a.m. Someone was singing outside, a soft lullaby. I looked through the curtains. The lights inside cabin 17 were on. A figure stood in the upstairs window, watching our cabin. The next morning, I mentioned it to my friends. Nobody believed me, until Ethan noticed fresh footprints leading from cabin 17. The prints stopped outside our front door. None of us had heard anyone walking around during the night. Curiosity finally won. That afternoon, we hiked to cabin 17. The front door hung slightly open. Inside, dust covered everything. The furniture looked untouched for decades. No electricity, no running water, no sign that anyone had lived there in years. Then Tyler found a family photograph. 4 smiling people stood in front of the cabin. Someone had scratched out every face, except one, a little girl. Written on the back were 5 words. She still waits upstairs. Nobody wanted to investigate. I wish we'd listened to our instincts. As we turned to leave, footsteps echoed above us. Slow, heavy, crossing the second floor. The sound stopped directly over our heads. Silence. Then, a child's voice whispered, "Don't leave me alone." Tyler looked at us. "You guys heard that?" Before anyone answered, something sprinted across the second floor. Not like a person. Too fast. Too many footsteps. The ceiling shook. We bolted for the front door. Just before I reached it, I looked back. A little girl stood at the top of the staircase. She smiled. Then her smile stretched impossibly wide. Far wider than any human face should. We never returned. Months later, I searched online for cabin 17. The rental website listed only 16 cabins. The owner denied that a 17th cabin had ever existed. I almost believed him, until I found one final photo on my phone. It was taken outside our cabin on the second night. Standing between the trees, far in the background, was cabin 17, and someone was waving from the upstairs window. There had only been 4 of us on that trip. The photograph showed 5. If you enjoyed this story and want more terrifying horror tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss our newest scary stories and creepy mysteries. Thanks for watching. And remember, some stories are better left untold. See you in the next nightmare. ***.